We'll be moving forward this morning with this particular presentation. Again, the topic is National Weather Service web resources, and we're referring to primarily the internet resources that we have available. I am speaking on a headset, so again, I'm not sure how it sounds at your end, but if you hear any popping or excessive noise at my end, please let me know, and I'll readjust the little microphone at the end of this headset.
Will do.
Now, I do have probably about 50 to 55 slides. Many of these we can just zip right through. I also have on a screen, adjacent screen, live web pages that we could refer to at any time, so we can provide examples, step-by-step interaction, so you can see how these web pages work and the various resources that you'll be able to access after we've had a chance to just kind of briefly touch upon this. So what I'd like to do, again, feel free to stop me at any given time. We are currently in the process of recording this presentation, so Corey Pieper, IT rep here at the regional headquarters, is going to be able to provide this, make this available later on, I guess, where we can go back and access the data. So we'll see how that all works out. I know he worked last night on this, so hopefully the system is working like it's supposed to. So with that said, can you all see the center screen that says NWS Web Resources?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead. We'll start off with a quick overview. I was just, for all the people that are on the call right now, many of you may not be fully aware of how the National Weather Service is structured, especially the local weather forecast office. So we'll do a brief background on that, and then we'll go into the meat of the presentation, which will be the NWS web links from a national perspective down to regional, then local, and then also our specialized centers that we have that provide a plethora of data that just really, you can spend days, if not years, going through. But we want to just be able to touch upon the things that I think that you might be able to use more effectively in your daily business that that they provide continually. And if you can look at the National Weather Service as a big production line, we are producing just mountains of meteorological information, both on a text format and also in a graphical format. And the information comes out on a scheduled basis, day after day. But there's also data that is non-routine, and that information is sent out on a more as-needed basis. But generally speaking, I would say the bulk of the data that we produce is all scheduled, and you can rely on that information being there consistently, day after day, hour after hour, from the respective different web links. And finally, we have a couple of things. I just wanted to show the differences between some of the text-based data and the graphical information that we have. And following up, like a brief note on Jetstream. This is our weather education resource that Mr. Dennis Kane, who worked here at the regional headquarters for multiple years, had worked on. It's an excellent, a very well done, interactive weather education resource, and we highly recommend it to anybody that wants to learn a little bit about the weather, whether it be at school age level all the way up to adult level. It's very well done. Dennis was very creative in taking sometimes what we call very complex meteorological situations and conditions and translating them into the most common denominator so that the average person can fully understand and wrap their brain around. So meteorology is one of those kind of things. It's a very complex science, and in the world of weather, we try to do the best we can to translate that so it has value to the average person so they can understand it without having to have a degree in meteorology or really anything more than just a basic understanding of science. So with that said, let's move on to our next slide. A little history. The National Weather Service has been around since 1870. We are a federal agency. If you want to look at where we stand in the pecking order of government, if you kind of relate it to a child, mother, father, then grandparent, we are basically the child of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the Department of Commerce is the grandparents. So it's Weather Service at the lower level, NOAA is the parent, and above that is Department of Commerce. Again, President Grant, back in 1870, established the Weather Service. There was a real need for it because at that time, two of the big drivers in our national economy was agriculture, and shipping, and we were losing a lot of our tonnage was shipping tonnage was lost at sea due to the weather elements that at that time just were not forecastable. We didn't have satellites in space. We didn't have radar near the coast. We had no real ground observing system to provide mariners information on what they could expect when they're transporting goods and services. Same thing with the agricultural component. We never really had a good database on climatic information to find out when might be the earliest you could possibly plant crops, or what might be the latest period of time due to potential freezes. So we needed to have some sort of observing network to help with develop a climatic base. So Grant understood that, and he also during the war realized the importance of weather information and how it impacted military operations. So basically, the Weather Service is there to save lives and promote commerce. That's our basic mission. And when we look at our structure as far as National Weather Service offices, this particular map here shows the Weather Service offices' areas of responsibility across the nation. There are 122 distinct and separate weather offices, and each one of those colored areas with the three-letter ID is that particular weather office in the area that they provide warning forecast services for. There are 6 Weather Service regions, but most importantly, it's the Weather Forecast Office that does the bulk of the actual production of weather information that you see in your nightly news or hear on radio, or when you search the web, no matter if it's a government website or if you're looking at a private website, that information for the most part is coming from your local National Weather Service office. There are typically about 25 people that work at a Weather Service office. There's typically 5 to 10 meteorologists that actually work the operating shifts. We have typically 2 people on per shift, 2 meteorologists per shift. We have 3 shifts per day, 7 days a week. There's no holidays, there's no weekend parties or nothing like that. There's always someone there at the Weather Service office monitoring radar, releasing weather balloons on a scheduled basis, monitoring a whole host of ground sensors, satellite data. We transmit this information through a wide array of dissemination systems, including the weather radio transmission, and that's been around for a long time, close to 40-plus years. It started off humbly as a small service up in the Great Lakes back in the 60s and early 70s and spread nationwide. We currently have well over 1,000 transmission sites across the nation, and we also even provide that information via podcast. It's available for just about any location in the country. I think we currently service well over 95% of the nation has access to the weather radio signal, again, across the nation. So it's quite an achievement where you can receive continual flow of weather information nonstop 24/7 via a designated and specified broadcast for weather information only, and also receive weather warning information around the clock. It's just a great service. Again, as I noted before, the 122 weather offices nationwide deliver the major part of the National Weather Service mission. Now, going into the websites, we have national, regional, local, and specialized center websites. The one I want to really kind of focus on immediately is the weather.gov. Weather.gov is our National Weather Service primary website. And what I have here is a snippet or the front page for the most part of what you see when you go to weather.gov. This is a map of the United States, county breakdown, and it's a hazards map. And the hazards map is designed to provide the user the opportunity to look at any location across the country and in one snapshot see where all the meteorological hazards are occurring or are forecast to occur across the nation. Now, there's multiple different ways you could look at this. You can say, well, what if I want to find out what's going on up there in the northern tier states, up there in Minnesota, North Dakota? There's an area of purple, and hopefully you see that your end is purple. And can you all see that, by the way?
We sure can.
All right. You can say, well, what is that designation of color up there? So if you look at the tab on the upper left-hand side, it says active alerts. And you can access the information for for that particular area in purple through multiple ways. You can directly click on the center of the screen and any one of those counties highlighted by purple, and that will redirect you to a text product that tells you specifically what is in effect. Or you can look at below and say, well, what is that? It's a winter weather advisory in purple, and you can click on that winter weather advisory highlighted in that red oval, and that will then redirect you to the text product for that geographical area. Now let's say that we go to our next tab on the upper left-hand section of the weather.gov main page. We take a look at forecast maps, and we click on that, and that will then redirect us to a whole host of various weather maps for the nation from the Weather Prediction Center. In this case here, we have our national maps, very similar looking to what you might see on your local weather forecast television station. You can click on those particular graphics, whether it be the national map, the digital forecast maps, precipitation maps in the lower left here, analysis maps, and get a whole range of graphical information going out multiple days. Now let's say we clicked on radar on the upper tab as highlighted in the red oval. That will take us to this image showing a national mosaic of radar data. Again, this is being collected from well over 100 plus radars nationwide, all mosaic together to provide you this national image. Now the national image then can be also looped, or you can drill down to a smaller subset. And if you look below, you'll see these thumbnails. These are regional thumbnails, and you can then get more of a regionalized image of radar data that we are collecting. Again, these are radars that are mosaic together, pieced together, kind of a patchwork, to come up with one singular image. And in this case here, we can see the shower and thunderstorm activity from back in March or February of 2006 as it impacts parts of Alabama, northern portions of Georgia, and of course the main thing we're looking at here is the state of Florida with the shower and thunderstorm activity basically impacting virtually the entire state, all the way from the Keys northward into the Ocala-Gainesville area. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Quick question for you, Walt.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the radar, and what time period would this represent? So is this over a 12-hour period?
This is a short, usually about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, and if you kind of look at the lower left here, you can see the time frame in universal coordinated time. It's approximately an hour. When you look at it, then you drill down to the next level, the weather forecast office level. These loops are generally about 45 minutes or so, and they're about 4 to 5 minutes per frame. The radar, local National Weather Service Doppler radar, produces a multiple slice cut of the atmosphere as it rotates around every 20 seconds, and it takes about 4 to 5 minutes to do a complete vertical sampling of the atmosphere. So if you could picture the radar basically rotating around on its pedestal every 20 seconds, after about every third revolution at a particular elevation slice, it moves up to the next elevation slice. So it's taking slices of the atmosphere, and then what we then do is we package it all together, and we get a three-dimensional picture of the atmosphere. One composite image, again, takes approximately 4 to 5 minutes to produce that out of when you take all the slices and put it together.
Gotcha.
Okay. Again, looking again at a regional picture, this was yesterday evening, probably around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and we can see we had shower and some isolated thunderstorm activity over Oklahoma, really from Oak City all the way down to just northwest of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. Now let's say that you're looking at the regional image and you say, well, what's really going on in the Oklahoma City area? You can click directly right over any location near Oklahoma City, and it will pull up the closest radar to that click. So let's say I went back and I'm halfway in between, maybe driving up from Dallas-Fort Worth and I'm up around Ardmore, Oklahoma. So then wherever I click will determine if I get the Dallas-Fort Worth radar or the Oklahoma City radar. So whichever one is the closest is the one will come up on the next mouse click. In this case, I was a little bit closer to Oklahoma City. I clicked around Ardmore, Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma City radar displayed from the local office. And then as you get into the local office settings, you can then loop, zoom, you can pan left to right, north to south, and you can look at additional radar imagery other than what we were looking at, what we call here the reflectivity image. You can also look at what we call velocity data. Now, for your purposes, I would say the velocity data, it's nice to know, it's nice to have, but that's really, it's more of an instantaneous tool used by meteorologists to help detect wind areas within a thunderstorm that might be precursors to tornadic development, and that what we would typically use for issuing severe thunderstorm or tornado warnings. Well, I guess maybe in the scope of what you're doing, you're looking more of a broad picture,
Yeah.
and so that it's more of a nice to know type information for yourself. But I've always told people that when you look at velocity data for radar, it's more of a meteorologist type of diagnostic tool, and it has you really have to know radar in order to use that tool properly. But we do make it available. Now, going back to the national page again, on the upper tab it says satellite. We have an opportunity to look at satellite imagery across the nation. And when you click on that tab, it brings you to this particular link that allows you to click on satellite imagery that's in 3 different channels that we use. Now, the satellites in space, the weather satellites, produce imagery in multiple different what we call light channels. But the ones that we try to provide for the public that are of the most use for the public are primarily the infrared, the visible light, and the water vapor. And to kind of give you an idea, vapor imagery is typically used for viewing the upper level of the atmosphere, where we can see flow patterns and so forth in a little bit more concentrated manner than we could with other imagery. So it's a very useful tool to really kind of get a perspective of these large weather systems. And what we're looking at in this upper center screen is a vapor imagery, satellite vapor imagery of Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. Very well defined hurricane with a very nearly perfect eye as far as its concentricness, and we can see the flow out around the hurricane, and quite massive as far as its overwhelming impact. But again, this is upper level, so what's happening down at ground level is really concentrated in this narrow area around the immediate eye. So again, satellite imagery again requires a level of interpretation, and you have to use it with caution. Infrared satellite imagery allows us to look at weather features during the nighttime hours, and the way this particularly works is we're not really looking at the visible light. We are looking at the temperatures of the clouds, and we take that temperature and convert it to a color. So we really can't see what's going on at night visually, but we can take the temperatures of the clouds, translate them into a color code, and there, as we see in this right center screen here, a beautiful display of Hurricane Katrina. And what's neat about using infrared imagery, it allows us to hone in on the more intense portions of the weather hazard. In case if you look at the lower bar here, the colors correspond to temperature, and typically the colder the temperatures of the clouds, these are much higher in altitude, which then correlate that the storm is probably stronger in those locations. So the higher the thunderstorm clouds, the colder the temperatures aloft, correspondingly usually equate with more intensity. Typically during the daytime hours, the satellite works very much like a camera, just like your hand camera that you might have to snap away pictures of your family. It's basically you can take a black and white picture from outer space looking down at the ground, and this is what you would see. And this is the visible satellite imagery, high resolution, used primarily for daytime viewing. when we get into the regional, let me go back. Are there any questions on anything I've discussed thus far?
I don't have any. Anybody from the team? I think you're doing great, Well, thank you.
Okay, again, just jump on in if there's a question, and we can always go to a live interaction. I have, again, the web page is all set up on another screen next to me here, and we can pull those over, and we can do some clicking. If you want to reserve that for the end, that'd be fine also.
Right now, we'll hold off on our questions unless there's something we need.
Okay. Now, drilling down to the regional web resources, this is from the Southern Region headquarters. This is our web page of the National Weather Service, and when you go to this link, srh.weather.gov, you'll come up with this image, which starts off with a graphic of the United States, and again, the local weather forecast office areas of responsibility are displayed. You can access local forecast and warning information in two ways. You can go to this little window here in the upper left-hand corner of the margin, and in this case here, you can put in your zip code, you could put in a city, state, or you can click on a specific point on the map, and it will automatically drill down to the local forecast and information for that point. In this case here, I put in my zip code, 76182, and what we get is the local weather forecast page specifically for my location, in this case, North Richland Hills, Texas. And yesterday evening when I crafted this up, it was about 54 degrees. We see the current information located right here. But let me kind of point out the areas to really focus on, because this is important no matter where you're at in the country, no matter which weather office you click on, this display will look the same. So if you access, for instance, you wanted to find out what weather information might be in New York City, from the Southern Region web page, you click on that map location. Again, we go back. If you click in New York City, your weather forecast information for that point location will look just like this. If it's Seattle, it would be the same way. If it's San Diego, it's going to look like this. So in the upper left-hand corner, the most important thing we try to display initially is, are there any watches, warnings, advisories in effect? That will show up in this block. You just click that link, and they'll provide you in text format what the watch, warning, advisory, or statement may be. Current conditions with an icon and temperature and other meteorological parameters are located just below that. Then, for a quick visual reference, going out 5 days, are forecast icons that provide you what the weather conditions are expected for that time frame, along with the probability of precipitation, the high and the low. Now, we are going to be making changes to that here in the not-too-distant future. We are going to be adding some color coding that will go around the particular time frame when there is a watch, warning, or advisory in effect. For instance, watches will be in yellow, advisories will be in orange, and warnings will be in red. That will help provide a more visual recognition of any type of inclement weather hazard that might be expected multiple days out on the horizon. Now, below these forecast icons is a detailed text description going out 7 days of the local forecast for your specific geographic area. Again, this is just more in-depth information for people that want to see what the specifics are, winds, temperature, meteorological conditions, in more of a expanded format. Some of the most popular information that people have a tendency to derive and grab onto is the radar, again, satellite information, and that's in the lower right-hand corner, and also the weather timeline, which is a great little tool if you want to find specific information on a number of meteorological parameters on an hour-by-hour basis going out 3 or 4 days at least. So a great tool if you want to look at trends. Okay, we go to now our specialized weather centers. And I think this is going to be something that you're probably going to be most interested in, and it might have greatest application to what you're maybe looking to do. We have multiple specialized weather centers. I think there's 7 of them now, 6 or 7. But I'm going to hone in on just the 4 that really provide a lot of graphical information, about hazards in the short, intermediate, and long term. The one that you're probably most familiar with is the Storm Prediction Center. They're tasked with providing specialized services in the severe weather area on a big picture. I've circled here, for instance, the severe weather outlook for day 2. So let's say that this is what it would look like when you went to the Storm Prediction Center, spc.noaa.gov. You would click on, for instance, if you're interested on what type of severe weather might be occurring on day 2. And in this case here, you would see this graphic would show up showing that there's a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from central to south Florida, mainly along and south of the I-4 corridor going down towards just down around just north of the Keys, maybe Marco Island, all the way up towards just south of Melbourne. And the green area would be just generalized thunderstorm activity, typically below severe thunderstorm limits. To the right, I've shown, just for demonstration purposes, is the text information that goes with this particular graphic. Typically, this text would fall just below it. And some other information that's important here on this graphic is the Storm Prediction Center has, over the last couple of years, started including if there is a risk of severe weather. If you look at the lower bar here, at the very bottom of the graphic, you'll see the risk level is slight. They'll tell you, for instance, the geographical area in square miles covered by the slight risk area, the amount of the population that is potentially impacted. So 5.5 million people impacted by this severe weather threat area. And that has a lot of impact. That has, it seems to be catching the ear of a lot of people in the media when they it kind of gives them another diagnostic tool to kind of provide people about the level of urgency and the amount of population affected. It seems to be very popular with the media. The population centers that are impacted in this risk is also described here. So again, it gives people that may not be familiar with geographics a quick reference to see what population centers may be impacted by severe weather going out down the road. The Weather Prediction Center, WPC, wpc.ncep.noaa.gov, provides probably the greatest number of graphical maps that is used by the broadcast media, and you have access to that. And let's just kind of look at one in particular. If we look at the legend on the left, we'll see the winter weather graphics. And when we pull that up, for instance, we have a capability to select from a wide array of forecasts for snow, sleet, and freezing rain on a national level. The maps are available in standard JPEG format, or if you want, in GIS format. You can. This is an interactive map, and you can, for instance, look to your right, and you can say, how much snow? Say, what's the possibility of 1 inch or more of snow over a particular time frame? So you can, for instance, in this case here, I selected 1 inch. The grid. What's the possibility of one or more inches of snow across the United States? What's the probability of that for a particular time frame, a 24-hour time frame? I selected ending at 12 Zulu, March 7th. In this case, that would be 6 a.m. On March 7th. So if you look at the graphic, the northern tier of states, right along the Canadian border, there is well over a 90 to 95 percentile probability of snow in these areas, at least 1 inch. But look further south, in our area is concerned, let's look at the southern Appalachians of Tennessee and North Carolina. And typically speaking, it's a pretty good bet anytime you get more than 50% or greater. This is a very useful graphic to kind of give you an idea that you're going to get snow. So I always like to use that 50% or more as a determining factor that you most likely will get snow. 50% or greater is a pretty good threshold. And you can then select on any one of these parameters. You could go to 8 inches, or you can select a time frame, and the graphic will be produced for whatever you've selected. You can also zoom in to a state or a region, and you can produce snapshots if you like, or you can do a screen capture or a lot there. Here's another graphic that's very popular. Is the precipitation forecast in various time intervals on a day, 1, 2, 3, all the way out to 7 days from the Weather Prediction Center. In this case here, there's a large bullseye of rain forecast just off the Louisiana coast, going to be primarily impacting Flipper and his friends, but further north, it looks like the forecast amounts are much less. We can look well to the northwestern coast of the U.S. You can see up there around Seattle, well over 4 inches of rain forecast, down to the Northern California coast, about 3 inches plus. Looking at our next national center, the National Hurricane Center, nac.noaa.gov. Not much graphic activity right now, but this is what you would typically see as soon as you went to this main homepage of the National Hurricane Center. You'd be able to select either the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic to see the tropical cyclone activity forecast for those various oceans. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice typically all our Weather Service web pages have a left margin where you can select particular types of information. In this case here, cyclone forecast, marine forecast, various other tools and data such as satellite radar information, analysis tools. One of the areas that I'd like you to kind of take a look at is the data archiving. There's a lot of great information about past tropical cyclones that you can pull up graphical information along with text data if you need that. So it's a great tool to fall back on for information that you might want to produce for, say, a PowerPoint presentation of what is the probability of, for instance, tropical cyclones during the month of September over the western Gulf of Mexico. And you can find that information there. Or what is the reoccurring chance of a Category 3 over the northern panhandle of Florida, again, for a Category 3 storm. That information is produced and provided there in graphical and text format. The last center I'd like to talk about is the Climate Prediction Center. Again, they provide a whole host of climatic information, and let's just say, for instance, we wanted to take a look at the projected outlook of temperatures on a 6 to 10 day basis across the United States. We can then click on the 6 to 10 day. Again, that's in the oval here, 6 to 10 day outlook. In this case, we're just mainly concerned about the temperature, but here's an outlook, the probability of below normal temperatures or above normal temperatures, in this case, for the period March 11th through the 15th. The dashed lines in this particular map represent the normal temperature. That would be the normal temperature, which would be the average of the high and the low combined for this particular period of time. If you were looking at Tallahassee, the normal temperature would be around 60 again. You might have a normal high of 72 and a normal low of 52 to come up with that basic average. But generally speaking, the below or the above is reference to these normals. And it looks like the Great Lakes, again, all the way back in New England, will be suffering through another cold period. No break for them this winter. And, of course, looks like the far west is going to continue with well above normal wintertime temperatures that they've been experiencing this year. Now, we have a lot of products and services on the tech side. Every weather forecast office provides a plethora of text information. Just a kind of a quick rehash for those that may not be familiar with, again, our terminology. The National Weather Service issues watches, warnings, and advisories. Watches means the conditions are possible. For instance, there may be the possibility of freezing rain, sleet, or snow in the distance. It might be 36, 48, 72 hours in advance. These text products are issued and updated every 6 to 8 hours. Basically, the idea of the watch is to inform people to be ready for the next phase, which would be either an advisory or a warning. Warnings are issued when the severe weather threat has been either observed visually or detected by weather radar. Now, we're talking about short fuse warnings like tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings. These are typically issued, they'll cover portions of multiple counties or a single county A polygon, as we call it, might be a kind of a, if you could picture a fan-shaped graphic that is covering the initial location of the threat, and then the fan basically moves in the direction that the threat is projected to move based on our radar observations. And again, that fan may cover, or what people call a polygon, may cover, again, a portion of a county or multiple counties themselves. Typically, these short fuse warnings are valid up to 1 hour. Their typical ranges of valid time are 15 minutes to 45. The tornado and severe weather statements. Statements there are to update the warning and progress. And the idea of the warning of statement, the statement is to provide, one, validation of the hazard that's currently that's impacting the community, and update for the media and the public, emergency management, about how that hazard is transitioning. Is it dissipating? Is it intensifying? What kind of reports do we have validating that this particular threat is really occurring? So the severe weather threat is basically, severe weather statement is basically a play-by-play action of an ongoing event. Local graphic cast. Our weather offices have been expanding the graphical capabilities at a rapid rate, and although we have not settled on a particular standard yet at this time, we're still relatively experimenting with graphical capabilities at the local level, because there's so many different ways of presenting information, and there's still we're learning and trying to find better ways in which to, again, present information on a localized level. Give you some examples of some ideas that we've been throwing out there and we've been putting on our local web pages are these graphical images of that are similar in design to many of the media graphical pages that you see on your nightly news. Here's one from Oklahoma showing the potential of snow, freezing rain, and rain. Here's an example of just cool and dry weather forecast for a Thanksgiving period over Oklahoma, with highs and lows forecast, along with the potential of wind. Here's another one here showing the Thanksgiving Day forecast for the Fort Worth, for the San Angelo area of responsibility. Again, mainly concerned with their area. Here's another graphical map from that same weather forecast office showing the potential of a low-pressure system that's going to be impacting over a particular period of time, and the areas of forecast snow and rain and so forth. Again, more graphics. And here's another one showing the potential of snow for the Dallas-Fort Worth area and areas east and west along the I-20 and I-30 corridors across North Texas. And again, you can get the idea. There's a lot of different ways of presenting weather information, and it varies from office to office at this time. Again, we are in the experimental stages of producing these type of low-level graphical images. Here's a case of trying to depict the severe weather threat of potentially a line of severe thunderstorms that might move across portions of central Alabama, giving people more of a timeline potential. And this kind of information is very important for emergency management and the media, because when you think about that, you have ongoing daily operations. People are moving about. You have people in school. You have people at work. When do you release people where you don't have a tremendous over impact on the economic base of a community? How do you minimize disruption to a community? So we're looking at ways of providing these graphics that provide a little bit more value-added information, so decision makers can be more effective in what they eventually decide and place on the community as far as the decision. I like these graphics. They're a little bit more, have a more of a professional media quality about them, and this comes from our forecast office in Little Rock, and again, we're looking at ways to emulate, not reinvent the wheel, but emulate and produce graphics that really have value for the public, emergency management, the media, and other users of this data. I'm going to briefly go through this part here. This is National Weather Service digital products. We spend a lot of time producing what we call digital forecast information on a national level, and some of the products look like this. This is a high temperature forecast based on a grid of grid points across the nation, where we actually populate very discrete little points on a map with data. So when you put it all together, you have a much more fluid graphical display of information. Again, this is a temperature forecast from back in 2007, kind of more just to give you an idea of what it would look like. The low temperatures forecast for the nation back in 2007, based on the digital grid packages that our forecast offices put together, and then all that information is then stitched together to come up with these mosaics. And here's a kind of a digital forecast at state level. And you can see how that has a variance from one end of the state to the next. Of course, Texas being a big state, you can have some tremendous variances. 50, 60, 70 degrees is not uncommon. And here's more of a local look, showing forecast winds along with temperatures. This is a hazards graphic. The last thing I want to touch upon is our Jetstream educational webpage. Again, just tremendous amount of information that is designed for the average person who has an interest in weather, where they can go in a kind of a course-like manner. You know, the legend on the left-hand side of the screen shows the various topics, and you can go through those topics. The information is designed to be user-friendly, very easy to digest. You don't have to have a degree in meteorology to understand this. Again, it's designed to provide a very, very basic understanding of meteorological concepts and ideas for the average person. And again, rounding out, these are just some web resource links of the primary pages that we've just gone over. The National Weather Service page, again, is weather.gov. The Southern Region main page is srh.weather.gov. And the key thing to look at all these pages to know if you're on a national government website is at GOV. Of course, that is the big kicker. And we strongly recommend that you look at our pages simply because virtually all the weather data, forecasts, watches, warnings, advisories that are generated for the United States come directly from the National Weather Service. And our friends in the media and the private sector, they take a lot of our data and they add value to it. They provide it to specialized services and things of that nature that is beyond our scope. But generally speaking, if you're watching your nightly news, or if you're watching even the Weather Channel, that information is the base data. It all comes from the National Weather Service. That rounds out my presentation. Are there any questions or comments, or did anybody like to possibly see any? We could go and go directly to any of these web pages if you'd like a live demonstration.
Walt, this is very helpful from our perspective. When we do our daily news generation, we're really looking 2 days ahead. So next 24 hours to 48 hours. So this helps us kind of narrow down where we need to do our searches and verify what the weather hazards are for that particular area. It also, since it takes us down so granular, we'll be able to also match up which media markets apply.
Okay. Currently on the screen, you mentioned looking at even past weather. And here's an example, for instance, you might want to find out where all the severe weather may have occurred across the nation. I've gone to the Storm Prediction webpage, and what we have here is, I'm going to magnify this a little bit. The Storm Prediction Center utilizes all the weather reports coming from our local field offices, and they generate a graphical map along with text information just below it. So I'm going to find a day, and again, you can go to the top of the screen here and look for reports of severe weather that occurs across the nation. And You can go back through the archive here. We'll just keep scrolling back till we find something of significance. I know we had a little bit of a break. Here we go. Here are the severe weather reports plotted on a graphical map showing mainly tornado, hail, and wind reports over a 24-hour period for the 20th of February 2014. Now, the legend here, for instance, just on the lower left states that these are the tornado reports for that particular 24-hour period. There were 37 reports. Does not mean there were 37 separate tornadoes. These are reports we have received about a potential tornado. And same thing below that, you'll see wind reports, 435, hail reports, 28. Some of these reports might be duplicates of the same event, but we take them and is a first look or first cut of the severe weather that may have occurred across a particular area. And specifics of these reports then are in a chronological order. May not be the easiest to read, but this is the current process, the way we display this information, at least from the Storm Prediction Center. You'll, for instance, see there was a possible tornado, in this case here, at this location. The location is one west of Detroit in Pike County, Illinois. Here's your specific lat log. So up in this area here, one of these red spots was a tornado. And just a plethora of reports if you wanted to get more specific information on these events. Again, this is, again, more of an archive, but it may be useful if you had a request, say, hey, can somebody tell me how much, where was all the severe weather that occurred yesterday across the nation? You could refer back to this specialized page of the Storm Prediction Center and be able to graphically provide that along with the more specifics of that report if needed.
Okay.
Here, for instance, is the is our Southern Region web page, giving a potential of severe weather going out for today. So, for instance, this was crafted by our Regional Operations Center here, and as we see on this graphic, it shows the heavy rain potential today is mainly concentrated over North Florida, and we zoom in just a little bit more. It may be a little fuzzy looking at your end here, but these are the four main potential areas of concern that we have: hail, wind, tornado, and flooding rainfall. And the threats, although from a probability standpoint are small, they're great enough for us to go ahead and highlight in these graphics. And it looks like across southeast Florida, the greatest threat today will be hail. Out of all these particular impacts, hail will be the greatest one.
Okay.
And we see if there's anything else here. Let's say we go back to the Storm Prediction Center. We wanted to find out what areas of the country have a threat, from a weather perspective, a high, what we call fire weather outlook, a threat of wildfires or any other type of fire. Here is day 2. And when we say day 2, then we can look at what's the time frame. We're forecasting this particular threat, an elevated threat of fire, valid from the 7th of March at 12 Zulu. Again, we use meteorological times, Zulu times. This is subtract 6 hours from this, and it would be from 6 a.m. on the 7th through 6 a.m. on the 8th. And the lower legend on the right, again, shows what the various colors would correspond to. In this case here, as an elevated risk of potential wildfire or general fire for that particular time frame. And then the text information that effectively describes the graphic is located right below that. We wanted to see, let's take a look at the Weather Prediction Center. And again, we wanted to see where's the greatest threat of excessive rainfall and see if we could find anything. Does not look like there's much of a threat nationwide for excessive rainfall. Looks like the soils can handle it, but we can still look at the forecast of rainfall going out 7 days. So let's say that we just want to concentrate on today. We can say day 1, 24-hour precipitation total. We can click on this graphic here from the Weather Prediction Center, and the forecast for rainfall over a 24-hour period valid from 6 a.m. Thursday, March 6th through 6 a.m. Friday, March 7th is depicted here. Again, the greatest amounts forecast just offshore South Carolina. Generally speaking, the land areas right along the immediate coastline looking like anywhere between 2 and 3 inches of rainfall, with rainfall amounts up to 2 inches right in the Tallahassee area. Again, this is forecast from today, from tomorrow through Friday morning.
Okay.
Anything else that you'd like to look at?
I'm going to open it up to my colleagues to ask some questions as well. But this is extremely helpful. While I'm waiting for any questions, I'm going to open up to the radar mosaic so you can again have an idea of how you can look at radar information on a more regional basis. I've clicked on the radar map, and let's say that I want to focus in on the southeastern U.S. I have a regional map now. Now, let's say that I want it to loop. I can click either on my left-hand side of the screen and look at the legend and say, well, there's the southeastern U.S. Here we go. Here's the loop. And we can loop that, and we can see the radar returns being depicted for about an hour time frame. And mainly the precipitation appears to, just from my visual IDing, it does not appear to be anything looks severe or not severe at this time, just mainly a lot of rain, moderate to some local heavier pockets of rain, again, from the Tampa area northward up towards the I-10 corridor just west of Jacksonville, and another cluster of showers and thunderstorms extending back from northern Mississippi back down towards Meridian, Mississippi, but it looks like that's non-severe. But let's say we want to go to a better resolution of this, a more of a national level. Just above the upper left-hand corner, you can click on Full Resolution Version, and that'll give you a much bigger image of the United States. And let's say we scroll down, and then we scroll to our right, we can see a more regionalized view. And again, I'm not sure I was looking at your end. It may take a few seconds before it to catch up. But now I basically have provided a little broader view with a little better resolution all the way from, say, from Florida back all the way to East Texas. And Barb, can you see that? Yeah, great.
Again, and this is more for situational awareness, maybe, if you wanted to kind of keep an eye on a broad area without having to zoom into each local weather forecast office. This is a good way to kind of give yourself a regional perspective. The only problem with this does not auto-update, so you do have to go in there and refresh this particular image. Let's go to the Climate Prediction Center, their specialized website. Let's say that we want to get an idea what the outlook is for 1 month. Temperature-wise, we can go to this main page and select the 1 month outlook. We can click on temperature, and we get a nice graphic again of North America showing the potential of temperatures at or below normal. Again, at or below normal for that particular period of time. So again, the Great Lakes and Upper Midwest are still forecast to have temperatures below normal for the month of March. And if we look at the corresponding precipitation graphic, again, forecast for EC, equal chances of temperatures being at or below normal. Again, for the bulk of the country, with below normal, again, forecast for the Midwest, Upper Great Lakes, and above normal precipitation forecast for the desert Southwest. look at the drought monitor, and you probably have used this graphic a few times. It gives you a perspective of the areas of the country under drought. There is a key on the lower right corner that describes the various intensities of the drought. You can click on a particular location. Let's say that we highlight Texas to get a more localized perspective. We can click one more time, and we get specifically the state of Texas. And as we keep drilling down the rabbit hole, we get more specifics of the drought conditions as currently observed here in the state of Texas, and then more text data that goes along with the graphic to help describe these areas of colored coding. So as you can see, these are Texas counties. The Dallas-Fort Worth area is located about where I have the cursor, and we currently are in a severe drought here in this location. And we can see our location in respect to other geographical areas and population centers in the state. For instance, up here in the Wichita Falls area, they have been experiencing a tremendous or exceptional drought now for a very long period of time. And then if we want to see what areas are forecast to possibly see some relief from that, we can click on the outlook. And here we can see what areas are expected to either improve or worsen with time. Again, as we click on that map, we drill down into the rabbit hole a little bit further for a little bit more information, along with some description below that that helps provide a little bit more information about the graphic and the colors and what they mean. So although a picture is worth 1,000 words, we still try to ensure that we have text information to back up that graphic. So it's just not a kind of a free-for-all interpretation of the information on the screen.
Yeah, well, this is Boyd Hathaway. These drought maps are great for when we send tips out and stuff. It's, you know, there's the wildfire issue with the drought, and then, you know, if they get just even a little bit of rain, you have the flooding issue after that. So it's always good to look at the drought maps and then the forecast as well.
Boy, that's exactly correct. You know, that is a great use of that, and you've hit on something that a lot of people sometimes forget about, is that you have drought, but what the unintentional impact of drought often is a capping or solidifying of the soil or the crust level at the very top. So any rainfall you get usually just runs off. A lot of people might just assume that it's going to get sucked, absorbed like a sponge. It doesn't happen that way. It often takes sometimes days, if not longer, for that top layer of the soil to be softened up enough to absorb any additional rainfall. So you're exactly right. A drought often leads directly to flash flooding, especially in areas that have had persistent drought. Any other questions or comments, or if you'd like for any kind of an interactive display of some of these different websites I've just briefly demonstrated?
It's been a great demonstration. My dad thinks he's a meteorologist, and he's been using the regional maps forever. And he looks at the different layers and stuff, and he has his own predictions, and he says the local people are wrong and all this stuff.
I know. My parents still tell me to this day, they live in the Detroit area, but how the local weather guys are wrong, and I always have to temper it and say, well, they really are getting their information from us, but they do have the flexibility. When you watch a weathercaster, no matter what channel you're watching, what network, we provide the information often in ranges. So one television weathercaster might say the high today in Tallahassee is going to be 78. Another individual might say 74. And the reason for that is that we'll say the high today in Tallahassee is going to be in the middle 70s. Because we know that that's more of the reality of the situation. It's never one specific temperature that covers a whole geographic area. Temperatures in that case can vacillate by several degrees across one metropolitan area. if you took the temperature at your toes and then went up 6 feet, you can find as much of a variance of as much as 10 degrees. And that's in a climate-controlled environment. Now you go out over a geographical area where there's terrain and variances there, you can have some real major temperature swings. So what we provide the media and the public is we try to temper it. We provide a range of temperatures because, realistically, that's what you have.
Yeah.
And
I know when I go to North Carolina, we look at the weather in the town, which is in the valley, and then where we always say, it's 8 to 10 degrees cooler up, where the house is.
exactly. Yeah, and that's a smart way to approach it because geographical variances have a tremendous impact on what the temperatures will be, the dew point, and all these other factors that we monitor, and the type of precipitation you might actually incur depending on what elevation you're at. Again, there's a lot of data I presented to. There's a lot here to absorb, and I've tried to squeeze in as much as I could in this 1 hour that we had available for today's presentation. And really, I wanted to focus on what I thought might be websites that could help you in your operations. Again, but feel free, if you found others within the agency that are helpful, use those also. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, and I'll tell you, hands down, this is very helpful to help us fine-tune how we're doing our daily outreach with news media and for social media purposes as well. So, one of the things that I know I'd like to explore with you guys in the future is for the weather offices, do they typically get calls from area news media on tips for preparedness? Like, for example, there's tornadic activity in Oklahoma, and you have meteorologists that are trying to give directions. Do they call you guys for advice?
Well, the local weather guys at most, they have worked with us for so many years that as far as even calling for that, it's already all worked into the system. We always have workshops and so forth that are ongoing from weather office to weather office, relaying the different types of safety materials that we've developed over the years in concert with the Red Cross and FEMA, and that information is relayed in multiple different ways. But I would have to say most of the media guys are really up on this because we relay that information repetitively throughout the year in public information statements, in awareness campaigns, even in the specific watches and warnings. We always have what we put in call to action statements.
Got it.
And those call to action statements are constantly being revised to fit what social scientists tell us are more appropriate or are statements that give people more definitive direction on how to respond and act for that particular weather hazard that we're projecting. For instance, if we had an exceptionally large tornado, what could be an EF4 and EF5, something that's a half-mile wide or better with winds in excess of, let's say, 200 miles an hour, for that type of catastrophic tornado that we believe is out there, we have a very specific call to action on what actions people should take, and that's built right into the warning. So this way the media entity doesn't have to call us. It's already there electronically. It's there in their hand.
Gotcha.
So a lot of all this information is already pre-processed. It's been already provided to the media, and then it's reinforced with the constant flow of information that's coming out through our watches, warnings, advisories, and follow-up statements. So it'd be pretty rare for them to call us because it's already out there, and it's already being provided, and it's being provided almost redundantly in case to the point where we have actually, for our policy and instructions that we provide our forecast officers, so we don't overkill the media and the public with only the most critical life-saving information they need for people to respond and take appropriate action. Excuse me. What happens is during these major severe weather events, it's almost like the fog of war. There is so much going on. There is so much information flowing about the actual hazard that the call to action statements become almost irrelevant. People just want to know what the information, where is the danger at,
Right.
so we can take the appropriate action. So most of that information is done beforehand, through preparatory type of preparedness activities. It's reinforced just before the event. It's, again, further reinforced during the event, but then deep in these big events, we can curtail them because, again, we've had so much social science review on this, and they've told us that after a while it becomes like you're dead, or you're beating a dead horse. It's overkill. So we try to find that balance with the amount of information we provide. Now, when it comes to like bigger events, these long-term tropical events, we will often, even before we put out a tropical cyclone watch, we will send out what we call a public information statement from that local office that's going to be impacted with a whole series of things you need to do. For instance, whether you need to get your medicines, get additional monetary funds, start looking at your insurance papers, take photographs, make sure you have that and things cataloged in your house. Start looking at the surroundings of your house, things that you need to tie down or move before the event actually even has potential. So you start gearing people up that way as a reminder. Because then once we get into the tropical event, we're asking people to rush to completion any kind of protective actions they need. So you're trying to, in advance of these systems, get people to get these things done before the panic mode sets in. I can tell you, even myself, as a meteorologist and being doing this for well over 35 years, that when there's a tornado warning, I become, and it's for my specific area, and when I had my family in the house and there was a tornado, within minutes from my house, you become very focused. You almost get like tunnel vision, and your main concern is protecting your family, and at the same time trying to keep up almost minute by minute where this hazard's at and when is it going to strike me, if it's going to strike me, and you almost just you're focusing on that.
Right.
So you're already beyond the point of what can I do for the house or my surroundings. It's just protection of life at that point in time. And so we try to focus on these different stages almost in the outlook, watch, warning stages, so that the appropriate information is already either out there or it's being scaled back so we can ensure that almost only the key information is out there. Because we've had cases where, give an example, the call to action statements that we'll put in these warnings, sometimes the forecast will load up on them and put 2 or 3 different paragraphs of things you should be doing. They become oblivious to people. And we've even had the media tell us that's enough. We just want the key information. So you can overwhelm people with too much data at a critical time. And again, it boils down to just balancing what's the most important for that particular period in this event.
Gotcha.
So there's so much information. Right now, this time of year, when our field offices, our warning coordination meteorologists are doing outreach presentations and having awareness campaigns, a lot of the pre-printed information that we have developed or incorporated from our partners out there in the emergency response community, we try to make that available in graphical materials. And I got to tell you that the media, I have found it, a lot of times they're pretty much on top of that. Now, if you have a Cub reporter, for instance, calling you up to do a weather story for a newspaper, that story nowadays could be for an internet news story, or it could be, right there for the print material. You'll still get them asking for some basic, what do we need to do, things like that, generally speaking. But we really do a lot of, when we do our outreach presentations, we'll include these call to action or these preparatory things that you could do to safeguard or mitigate your home and property for each particular type of hazard. And we have it for, we like to incorporate as much as we can to help mitigate for the various hazards, because there's so many different types, anything from heat to winter weather to tropical to tornadic, the flooding. And we're not experts in that area. That's where you guys are doing a great job in pulling together a lot of these different subject matter experts to come up with ways to mitigate. And these are things I think that will be very useful for our warning coordination meteorologists when they do go out and do their presentations, that even if it's one or two slides, these are things that can be done to help. I know, Barb, we've talked, Tammy, we've talked, and even things like I myself, although I don't have any documentation on it, but things we do as homeowners here in Texas to mitigate against a home, for instance, when we have extreme heat. What can you do for your house? How do you prevent problems that could cause significant financial burden on you? And something as simple as using water to you basically water the sides of your foundation could minimize or prevent you from having to spend $25,000 in a foundation repair, which is a very typical problem here in Texas, very typical. And that is an issue that crops up when we have these long periods of high temperatures at or above 100 degrees for multiple days, and with little or no rainfall or no cloud cover. So you just get this constant radiant energy that's cooking the soil, and before you know it, you've got problems with your house. How do you reduce, for instance, how do you mitigate against excessive heat? Well, there are a lot of things people can do that. Just if you can't afford the window coverings or the solar, just shutting the shades when you go to work, just closing the blinds can significantly reduce the amount of electrical use in that home to cool that house while you're away. I do it as a matter of practice every day. I close all the blinds when I go to work, and it has significantly reduced the amount of electrical consumption that I have, which then is putting further lessens the burden statewide on our electrical grid, and then helps reduce our energy costs here. So there is a cascading effect and you guys, of course, you know this very well, that the homeowners can do to help minimize the impacts of all these weather hazards. And there's a collective benefit in all this that maybe sometimes people don't realize. We've had recently here in the state of Texas where to help keep energy costs down, the energy companies will use meteorological data to go ahead and project what the consumption levels will be of energy over a particular seasonal period of time. In this case, the winter weather, and what that does is they will only buy enough or purchase enough electricity or fuel, basically supply on demand type of accounting, so it doesn't create the need for holding on to additional resources that may not be needed. And what's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is it reduces the cost of the homeowner in electricity costs, natural gas costs, home heating oil costs. So again, here's definitely the trickle-down economics impacts of how weather data can be used to minimize the impact to homeowners and actually put more dollars back into the average homeowner.
Right.
So it's really, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Have you guys done kind of a cost-benefit analysis in any way?
We don't do that. We left that, but that's a private sector role. And we try to deal with the weather side of the fence. I'm sure the insurance industry has done stuff like that, and even the people that are in the arbitrage business of futures contracts and things like that, they can tell you really what that costs, especially the energy companies can tell you that. That's more of something that they would deal with. But I know just as a homeowner, it has a tremendous impact because, when I get the little letters they're telling us that, the state has these energy companies have two ways they could look at it. They could plan for a worst case scenario, and that means that they have to purchase natural gas, at least the ability to get natural gas on a much greater amount to operate the utility plants and feed the customers at the local residential level. They could plan for a worst case scenario, or they could base it on supply and demand needs based on forecasts that we have. If you just go out and say, well, our capacity is this, and we're going to go for the extreme, what that forces is an undue burden of having that additional resources available when you really may not need it. And it just puts additional cost pressures on everybody. So again, the utilization of weather information, this really does help promote the national economy. And if you use it wisely, it helps companies and businesses and even the average homeowner financially improve their situation. And this is what goes right back to the beginnings of President Grant when he established the Weather Service in 1870. He saw that there was a financial gain for the United States to have good meteorological signs to help us better in our business activities on a daily basis.
Makes perfect sense.
So, very, very astute, smart individual, I guess, from that perspective. And here we are, 140 plus years later, and when you look at weather data and the things that we've been able to achieve in such a very short period of time, it is phenomenal. I look at my 35 plus year career in weather, where we were at when we first started, where we're at now. I mean, the amount of leapfrogging is almost exponential. I think most people don't realize that in our modern times, we have more data available to the average individual at any moment given in time for any location than at any point in history. And we know more about what's going on than at any given time. I mean, weather radar wasn't developed until the 1940 plus. So only in our modern era was that data available. And there are many countries till this day that don't make that data available to their populations. And in our country, we have data just basically, it's free. We encourage people to utilize it. The radar information is free. Satellite information. So it's just to the benefit of the American public that they have this data available to them, and it helps, again, in the prevention of loss of life and mitigation of damage to our property, again, if we just react appropriately to these hazards that we forecast. So, again, it's come a long way. I feel very proud to be part of this whole process, and it's when I see the achievements every day that we have. We reduced the tornado fatality count in this country from 500 plus per year in the 1950s, when the population was 1/2 its size, to on an average of about 50 per year current. And you got to ask yourself, how has that happened?
Right.
The population has doubled, and we're geographically covering more areas now. And it's done because of the interactions of government working with the private sector and getting meteorological information out to everybody and having it readily available at everybody's fingertips. So it's quite a process. It works pretty well, and we just encourage people to continue on using it. And of course, we here at the Weather Service will continue to look at ways to use all the different forms of communication that are currently available and developed, and that we migrate to. And it's a big job because, as you all know, 20 years ago, the internet was just something that people thought about and only a few people actually use. Today, it's just throughout the entire culture, and the ability to get data at any given time can be through a whole host of dissemination methods that's very hard to keep up with.
Walt, thank you so much for this today. Very, very helpful, and I know we've got 2 others that are going to need to leave us for other meetings. So I just thank you again. I know our team very much appreciates it, and that certainly will, as I mentioned, fine-tune our efforts here with news media and for social media. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And Barb, if you have any, if you or your team have any questions on any of these websites, don't hesitate to send me an email or a note. We can step you through it, okay?
Very good. And Barb has already stepped out. She had to go to another meeting, and so we will definitely take you up on that offer.
And that's you, Tammy, right?
Yes.
Okay, Tammy. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Thanks, Walt.
hey, guys, and once I get off this call, I'll check with our IT and find out how the recorded information can be accessed. We had to do some technical juggling yesterday to make sure this all worked. So we'll see if it actually did go ahead and record and take it from there. Okay.
Sounds good. And just as a follow-up note, I did talk to Barb yesterday about a call she's setting up with you on the Texas State Collaborative. And I told her that I would put together those slides for the communications team and share that for that phone call.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, Tammy.
All right. Thank you so much, Walt.
You guys have a great day, okay?
You
Talk to
too.
you later.
Thank you. Thanks.